Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, by far one of the more polarizing football teams in the country heading into 2025. I mean, you look at how people talk about this team in the preseason, there's a lot of conversation on look, you look at this roster, the Florida team that you see on paper, I think it's hard to argue that this is not one of the more dangerous teams in the country going into 2025. And there's a lot of people that are putting Florida in their college football playoff predictions, putting them as a top 10 team in the country going into 2025. I think that makes a lot of sense, but I think there's another segment of people, including some Florida fans, no doubt about it, that say, hey, I love what this team looks like from a roster standpoint, love what this team looks like on paper. But you also look at, hey, can Billy Napier put it all together? And can we see a Florida team that is consistent enough to make the college football playoffs in 2025? Certainly a valid question as well. Want to get into this conversation a little bit more. Now, the first part of our conversation, just going to be an elevator pitch from me in terms of why I think Florida is very capable of being a top 12 college football playoff caliber team in 2025. The other portion of this conversation is, what does the schedule look like? What's it going to take for Florida to make the college football playoffs? That's another interesting part because it is a very difficult schedule. And I think the unique thing about Florida is, look, you're not counting them out in a single football game in 2025. Like, this team is capable of winning a lot of big time football games against just about any team in the country. Can they win enough of those football games in 2025? That's the conversation that we're going to get into. Before we do, and as always, whether you're a Florida fan, whether you're a Miami Hurricane fan, whether you're just a college football fan that's looking at this Florida team, would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. Let it fly. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it now. The first question we got to talk about is, look, is this team good enough? Like, that's where it starts. You can have as good of a schedule as you want. If you're not a good enough football team, you ain't making the college football playoffs. Yes, this team is plenty good enough in terms of what we see on paper. And I think it starts for me with the returning production. And it's not returning production from a bad football team that we saw in 2024. Sometimes I think people use returning production as a little bit too strong of a stat. Look, are you returning production of a good football team? That's a little bit more important. Now, I look at the version of Florida that we saw in 2024. That version of Florida was one of the more dangerous teams in the country. That version of Florida looked like a college football playoff team in the month of November in 2024. They return a good chunk of that roster going into 2025, and in an era where so many teams and programs are like a revolving door in terms of losing guys in the portal, getting guys in the portal, brand new roster. I look at Florida and say, not only the returning production, but the continuity that this football team has, specifically on the offensive line, that's going to work into Florida's favor. I mean, you look at this offensive line and say that this is an offensive line that, one, played very good football in 2024, especially in the back half of the year. They're pretty much just running it back, just replacing a right tackle who's a solid right tackle. But Florida, I think, thinks they have some answers at that right tackle position. Now, you'll notice we're 4 minutes in. We haven't even talked about DJ Lagway. He's obviously a massive piece. Now, the reason I don't always choose to lead with DJ Lagway is not because I don't like DJ Lagway. I've been very vocal that I think he could be the best quarterback in the country in 2025. The real reason I don't lead with DJ Lagway is there's a lot more to this team than just DJ Lagway, but you're looking at DJ and saying he's going to play a massive part. And when you have a quarterback that at times can put on that Superman cape and elevate your football team, especially in those massive games that Florida's going to have to play routinely in 2025, that's a massive piece of the puzzle. And I think the intriguing thing about DJ Lagway that I don't think a lot of people understand is, DJ Lagway was far from 100% in that 2024 year. I mean, he was a true freshman in the month of November, really playing some good football. Probably wasn't even 75% healthy for a true freshman in the SEC. The way that DJ Lagway played, that should fire up Florida fans in terms of what he can be in 2025. Now, I want to get to the schedule, but I got a couple more notes on my elevator pitch that I want to include. I think Florida answered their biggest spring practice question, and that was, hey, do we have enough around DJ Lagway? There were a lot of Florida fans in the winter months that were, and I'm included here, banging the table for Billy Napier in Florida to go out and get some wide receivers for DJ Lagway in 2025. Now, they went out and got J. Michael Sturdivant, who I think was a very good addition. But you talk about what Dallas Wilson can be as a true freshman, getting Eugene Wilson back healthy, the emergence of Aiden Mizell. Vernell Brown's another freshman. Dallas Wilson gets all the national media attention because of that spring game. Vernell Brown's going to play. All of a sudden, we went from early spring questioning, are we good enough at wide receiver, to saying this could be a very good unit in 2025, and they can run the football with a couple of talented running backs with an offensive line that we think is going to be pretty good. Multi-dimensional offense that can win a lot of different ways with a with a difference maker at the quarterback position. That's a very good recipe. Then you go to the defensive side of the football, and what I'll say here is two things. Number one, you return pretty much that whole defense that you saw in the month of November in 2024. That defense was elite. It was one of the best defenses in the country, creating turnovers, creating negative plays. I believe they didn't allow more than 17 points a single game in the month of November and went up against some really, really good offenses. The other storyline here is Ron Roberts having that full off season with Florida, where it was very clear that some point in that season, Ron Roberts really took over this defense. And I thought you saw a switch in terms of how that defense played. Well, what does it look like now with Ron Roberts having a full off season, spring, fall camp, winter workouts, to really build up this defense and get guys more comfortable with how Ron Roberts wants to do things? That's another thing that I think is driving the hype train for Florida in 2025. Year two defensive coordinators. It's a big storyline. And I think Florida kind of, nobody really talks about it because it was kind of confusing what was going on with that defensive coaching staff. It's essentially year two DC here. And I think that's going to play a role in Florida in 2025. The schedule. The schedule is the big thing that you have to get through. Now, we're going to break up this schedule into three different portions, but I want to start with this. What is the record that Florida needs to have to get into the playoffs? 9-3 clearly gets you in. We didn't see teams who were 9-3 get in last year. They gave the nod to teams like Indiana and SMU. I don't think the playoff committee is going to do that again. I think they're going to really think about the strength of schedule when they're trying to pick teams in the playoffs, because we kind of found out the hard way, letting in a team like Indiana or SMU that really could not compete at that level. I think you're going to see the benefit of the doubt go from, hey, who has the better record, to, hey, who played a tougher schedule and looked like the better team. I don't think it's crazy to say 8-4. Now, 8-4, you're going to need some breaks, like what goes on in the ACC, what goes on in the Big Ten, what goes on with some other teams in the SEC. If Florida wants to get him with an 8-4 record, look, I think it's possible. Considering you win 8 games with this schedule, you got a lot of big time wins on your resume, but you probably need a decent amount of help. I think 9-3, you're locked to get into the playoffs. 8-4, probably not getting in, but I think there's a chance depending on how things shake out elsewhere. Now, you look at the schedule, we're going to break it up into 3 different segments. You got your opening month of September, if you will. You got 2 wins right off the bat at home against G5 opponents, 1 FCS opponent. On the road at LSU, on the road at Miami. 2 teams I'm very high on. Heading into 2025, you got to win one of them. You leave the month of September 4-1 with a road win against LSU or Miami, you feel pretty good. So you kind of leave 3-1 going into the bye week. Then you have this next stretch of teams where you got Texas, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. You got 2 of them at home. I think you got to go probably 2-1. And so if you lose to Texas, you probably got to go on the road to Kyle Field and win, and you got to beat Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State should be a pretty easy game. That should be almost a double bye week. You play Mississippi State, go into your bye week. Looking at Texas and Texas A&M, you love getting Texas at home. Early October, Arch Manning still probably getting his feet wet in terms of being a starter in the SEC. And I'll say this, you're 3-1 going into that football game, maybe even 4-0. Texas coming to town. with a young quarterback. I know he's going into year 3, but hasn't played in a lot of these kind of environments. With Ron Roberts coaching the defense, like that, you like that. You like that if you're Florida. And if you drop that game, you got to go on the road to Texas A&M and win, which I think is a very winnable game. I mean, it's hard to win at Kyle Field, but I also think Florida's a very good team. So you got to go 2-1 there, which makes you, if we're doing quick math here, makes you 5-2, and you have to probably go 4-1 in the back half here. And it's not going to be easy, but I think that's very, very gettable. Let's talk about that Georgia game first. Number one, there are more question marks about Georgia than we've had for this football team in a very long time. They lose a lot of NFL draft talent from a team that just underperformed on the offensive line. They underperformed in the pass catcher department. And you could even ask within the program of Georgia, I think there's more question marks than usual in terms of replacing these high-end NFL caliber difference makers. A couple of years ago, Georgia would lose guys like Jordan Davis and have a guy like Jalen Carter on the roster still. You look at losing Jalen Walker. You look at losing Michael Williams. You look at losing a guy like Malachi Starks. You look at losing, I believe, 4 NFL dudes on the offensive line. I think there are more questions about how we replace all of that talent, not to mention you got a new starting quarterback in Gunnar Stockton. I'm not getting up here and saying Florida's going to beat Georgia, but I think that's a game where I think a lot of previous years you kind of just chalk it up as a loss. That's not the case. I mean, go back to last year with DJ Lagway healthy. Florida was giving Georgia all they could handle. Arguably was on their way to winning that football game until DJ Lagway gets banged up. I think Florida is a better football team going into 2025, and I'm not sure if Georgia is. On the road at Kentucky, look, if you're a playoff team, you got to win that football game. On the road at Ole Miss, this is a game that I feel good about if I'm Florida. It's like the polar opposites here. Florida, a lot of continuity. Ole Miss, pretty much the exact opposite. New starting quarterback. Here's the thing with Ole Miss. They used the portal heavily once again. Last year, you knew this team had the chance to be really, really special, and it was on paper. Like an Ole Miss team that's playing their best football was one of the most dangerous teams in the country last year. I look at the kind of players they brought in this year in the portal. It's just not the same. They don't have those Walter Nolan, Trey Amos kind of guys. And so I look at Ole Miss, like they ain't going to be bad, especially if Austin Simmons, their quarterback, can be a guy that there sounds like there's a lot of optimism around him. But I don't think it's going to be the team that we saw last year, a team that Florida beat. Tennessee, all of a sudden you're looking at that game a lot differently too without Nico. Like that's a game that Florida at home should win. And Florida State, you probably should win there at home as well. Like there's a very real chance, even if you lose to Georgia, you probably feel good about those next 4 games going 5-1. You do that, you're 9-3. You're making the college football playoffs. And again, even those 3 losses that we're maybe including here, it's not like Florida can't win those football games. Like there's not a game on this schedule that you're just saying, Florida don't stand a chance. Now it's about consistency. You want to ask Ole Miss, ask Alabama. Those were college football playoff caliber teams that failed to be consistent week in, week out. For Billy Napier, that's been a struggle. The consistency is going to have to be there. I got no worry that Florida can win some of these big games, but you can't go on the road and drop it in Lexington, Kentucky. You can't have Mississippi State come to Florida and win that football game. Got to be consistent. Can't have those mental lapses that we've seen all too much from Florida the last couple of years. And I'll say this, having a little bit more continuity on the coaching staff, a little bit more continuity on the roster, that's probably going to help with the consistency. And look, if Billy Napier can't get it done, then the in my opinion, the voices about Billy Napier's future in Florida are going to get loud, because this is a team that he's put together, and I give Billy Napier all the credit in the world. He's put together a team that can make the college football playoffs. Now you got to go and execute. And if you can't, then it's like, is it ever going to happen for Billy Napier during his time in Gainesville? That's my take. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.